Hello, my bookish friends. Welcome or welcome back. I'm Elizabeth. This is Reading Wryly, and today we've got a couple of guest co-hosts on here. Hopefully they won't be disruptive. Right, sir? Right, sir? We'll see. Anyway, I'm here to talk about the books that I read in January. I didn't get a whole lot of reading done this month. I did read 6 books. I am going to tell you about them as usual, starting with the lowest rated all the way up to my favorite book of this month. And I will break them up into the chapters down below to make this a little bit easier to navigate. A lot of these are covered either in the vlog that I put up or in book club discussions. So if you really want a whole deep, in-depth discussion, I'm gonna link those above and below in the description so you can go check that out as well. This is Rippy. This is my cuddle bug. He's the one that likes to cuddle, and I can pet him and hold him and he'll just go limp. And then Denver is the uptight one, but he's also smart. This one, not a lot going on in here. 3 of these books you can find in my reading blog that I posted this month. That is a mishmash of Winterween as well as my birthday and trip to New York. So it's kind of a travel vlog, reading vlog. It's a lot of things in one. So I'll just let you know right now, these are the 3 books that I read in that vlog. So if you want more detail or do you want to see my reaction as I'm reading them, check out that vlog. Anyway, I'm going to start out with my lowest rated, like I said, and this first book is a 2-star. It's the first 2-star of the year. It's not looking good. I did give it 2 instead of 1 because there are some redeeming qualities, but I just really didn't like this one, and that is Anna O by Matthew Blake. Oof. This one is rough because it sounds like it's one of those books that's specifically geared towards me. Like all of the alarm bells went off when I was reading the description. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna love this. It's compared to The Silent Patient. It's compared to Gillian Flynn, which don't even link those things in your head right now because he's not on par with Gillian Flynn. I also did read the new Alex Michaelides book this month, so we're going to talk about some comparisons between him and Matthew Blake right now, because Anna O, let's just tell you what it's about. Like, honestly, there's so much going on. This book was such a cluster F of ideas and themes and quotes, and a lot of it centered around psychology and Freud and things that I am obsessed with. And to a certain extent, this feels like something that I would want to write. And so I was really in my head about this because I also was sick this month and on cold medicine and frankly not fully functioning mentally. So I didn't know if I was projecting onto this book feelings of insecurities of my own, or I don't know. Even after having read it, I still feel this way about it, so I feel like I feel like it's right. Let's read the description because this also misleads you into thinking what this book is about is one thing and it's actually a totally different thing. What if your nightmares weren't really nightmares at all? We spend an average of 33 years of our lives asleep. Do you know how many times that same sentence is in this book as well? They just beat you over the head with it. They say it so many times, and then I actually looked up the author because I was like, who is this guy? On Goodreads, and just pulled up his little description or whatever, and like the very first sentence is, after discovering that the average person spends 33 years of their life asleep, Matthew Blake felt the pull of a story.
Please, I can't do this.
So we all know that now. That's a thing we all know, and he's not going to let us forget. What really happens and what are we capable of when we are asleep? So we're following Anna Ogilvy. She was a budding 25-year-old journalist. Like she had her own magazine. What, bud? What? Come here. You don't need to cry. Come here. Okay, I've just decided, like, I'm not even gonna edit this like I normally would. This is gonna be a lax wrap up, okay? Because we've got the dogs and they're coming in and out and it's just gonna be a pain to edit. So I'm just gonna leave most of this in. Hope that's okay with you guys. She has her own magazine that she set up with her friends, and it's like she's really into journalism. Then one night she stabs both of those friends, seemingly out of nowhere and with no motive, and she falls asleep and hasn't woken up since then, and that was 4 years ago. So in current day, she's 29, she's in a coma-like state. And it's been like this huge Netflix thing, this like documentary after series after all of this about whether or not Anna is responsible because she supposedly did this while she was asleep. Sounds great, right? I mean, it drew me in. And then we're also following this guy, Dr. Benedict Prince, who is a forensic psychologist and an expert in the field of sleep-related homicides, specifically, very specific. And he's been tasked with waking Anna up so that she can stand trial. But she's very high profile, and he's got career secrets and a very complicated personal life of his own. And so delving into this really high profile case is a little bit risky for him. As Anna shows the first signs of stirring, Benedict must determine what really happened and whether Anna should be held responsible for her crimes. Only Anna knows the truth about that night, but only Benedict knows how to discover it, and they're both in danger from what they find out. Now, my first impressions after reading this is, holy crap, that sounds a lot like the synopsis of The Silent Patient, because we have the doctor who's never had a case like this, and you know, he's got his own personal problems, and then we have the woman who either cannot communicate because she's just not speaking or is asleep in this case. So I'm like, from the get-go, this has to do something very different from The Silent Patient. It has to separate itself. And then like right from the beginning, Matthew Blake comes in with all of these Greek references, and I'm like, dude, come on, separate yourself. Do not, anything that ties you to Alex Michaelides, you need to cut the strings. And he just didn't do that. It didn't go overboard with the connections, but it was definitely something I noticed going into it that way. For the first half of this book, more than half of it probably, we are following Benedict Prince as he's trying to navigate this situation. We're learning about his family and his life and his workplace, and he works at this very specific hospital where he does his research, etc. All we really know about what happened the night that Anna supposedly murdered these two people is that they were on a farm, and it took place during this game of hunters and survivors. And we have no context for that. We don't know like anything else. And just the fact that he's like going on and on about how there's documentary series and Netflix specials and like all of these things, and he doesn't give us any details about the crime at all for the entire first half of the book, more than first half of the book. It's almost like he's trying to redirect us, but so much so that the actual, what's the right word? Like the essence of what this story is or what it's claiming to be in the description and the synopsis is just something completely different. Like it's not even that. And so it's like, not only do I feel taken advantage of as a reader, because just say what this story is about, because that's what it's about. And it's like it's trying to sell it from this particular angle as a selling point, and that's not the case. That's not even the selling point of this story. So I feel like the marketing on this was just totally messed up, or it was over edited or under edited. Honestly, it was doing so many things at once. But no, it got so deep into this sleep disorder. They're calling what's happening to her, what is it? Resignation syndrome. It is a hypothesized condition. This is not approved by the World Health Organization, but a hypothesized condition that induces a state of reduced consciousness, first described in Sweden in the 1990s. It's a condition that affects predominantly psychologically traumatized children and adolescents in the midst of a strenuous and lengthy migration process. So he's using this and he's delving into this and going deep, deep into this. And it really has nothing to do with the story. I'm more frustrated because this guy knows his psychology. There's so much in here about Freud and about the history of psychology and how it came to be what it is today. And I loved that. I just soaked that stuff up. But it's pretentious. It's pretentious at its core. And he's just like spitting facts. It's like this guy wanted to show everyone how smart he was. And so he made this book. Maybe that's too harsh. I don't know. Maybe that's too harsh. I don't know this guy. But That's the impression I got. And the next book that I want to talk to you about is the actual Alex Michaelides' new release, The Fury. Again, Alex Michaelides wrote The Silent Patient, which was a huge hit and which I loved. I liked his last book as well. The more I read from him, my interest is dwindling a little bit. This one just did not work for me. It felt like if you've read Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. It did have this narrator that broke the fourth wall and talks to you as the reader, and it got really kitsch and really cheesy for me at times that I just couldn't get with the program. And then also it reminds me a little bit of like Evelyn Hugo, because we're following one of these characters, Lena, who is the only American character in this story, and she's got this old Hollywood American upbringing where she became like a famous movie star, but then she retired at the age of 40 and no one really knows why. As we get flashbacks and we learn about her life, that part kind of gave me that Evelyn Hugo vibe. So if you kind of put those two things together, that's really what it felt like for me. The way even the synopsis is set up is from the perspective of the narrator talking to you. The night ended in violence and death as one of us was found murdered. But who am I? My name is Elliot Chase, and I'm going to tell you a story unlike any you've ever heard. So that's Elliot's kind of like pitch, I guess. He keeps remarking on your judgment as you're reading it, like, oh, no, don't be hasty. He's offering to refill your drink as you're reading it. And some people might really like this. For me, though, it does not work. And he keeps saying, now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. And then he dangles it in front of us like a cat toy. You know, just the kitschiness of like breaking that fourth wall over and over and over. It just didn't work for me. Lana has this home on this Greek island. It's a private Greek island. So she's getting all of her friends together to meet up there. She has a son, Leo, who is telling her that, hey, I want to get involved in acting. And she's like, absolutely not. She's got this friend, Kate, who had a past relationship with Lana's now husband. And so that's kind of messy. And then there's Elliot, he kind of plays the best friend role, but secretly, you know, loves her. And so that's the general cast. Is there anyone else? I mean, there's, I think, one lady who is like their housekeeper. There was another lady who like maintains the island, or a man, I mean, that maintains the island. And him, I felt like these characters were convenient. I don't know. It was all right. Here's what I liked about it. Let's switch to that. Here's what I liked about it. The whole Greek reference and the idea of the fate versus character thing. I thought that was really cool. I think I have a quote somewhere. Okay, here's a quote from chapter 12. Which comes first, character or fate? This is the central question in any tragedy. What takes precedence, free will or destiny? And this is Elliot talking to us. Were the terrible events of that next day inevitable, ordained by some malevolent god? Were we doomed, or was there hope of escape? This question has haunted me over the years. Character or fate? What do you think? And then it talks about this Greek philosopher, Herodotus, who says that character is fate. But then we're also getting the question of, if who you are determines what happens to you, then what determines who you are? So like I was saying before, that nature versus nurture. Let's talk about the audio narrator. The actual audio narrator sounded like Michael Caine, who I like.
You know, I don't appreciate your selfishness and immaturity.
It was generally well done. It's another good quote. All creativity is born in the desire to escape. Creativity is born in the desire to escape. So it could be like creatively trying to get away with a crime in like the most literal sense, but also any kind of creativity like making a piece of art, we are also escaping. Even reading, we are escaping. I like that. It makes you think. Generally, there are some really great points in here, but it just wasn't good enough. It just wasn't good enough. 2.5. Although still better than Anna O. Okay, this next book I gave 3.5 stars to, and I do feel confident in that rating, and that is Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. I have read at least one Darcy Coates book in the past, and for some reason I've only associated this author with haunting stories. And so when I saw this one and it looked like isolation in winter, horror, thriller, I was like, okay, introspect. I got this one on Everand. Surprisingly, this one read so much to me like a classic mystery, in the way that our characters are being picked off one by one. At the end, we get this kind of diatribe from our villain who explains why they did this. I didn't think the villainous monologue was poorly done. Sometimes authors will use that in order to fill in plot holes, and I didn't think that was the case. I felt like it was uncovering things that I hadn't noticed previously. But generally, we're following this woman, Krista, and this is set in the Rocky Mountains, so in America, and she joins a tour group that's heading to this lodge in the middle of the Rocky Mountains in the winter. It's cold, a lot going on. Their bus on the way gets stopped. They get blocked by a fallen tree. Krista and her boyfriend get out, and he's from this area, so he wants to go look for an overlook, and she thinks maybe he's proposing. They get lost, and eventually Krista meets up with the rest of the group, but her boyfriend has gone missing. They end up taking shelter in this cabin, this random abandoned cabin in the middle of nowhere that they find. This could be one that would be really good for mystery readers who are looking to get into horror, because the way that these people are killed is their bodies are essentially disassembled, and so it's, you know, it's not going into horrific detail about that, but yeah, it's a little bit more grotesque maybe than your classic murder mystery. This is going to give you a little bit of a taste of horror while still sticking to the structure that you're used to from a classic mystery. And so, yeah, I feel like this would be really good if you're looking to get into horror. And plus, I love isolation in the snow especially. All right, let's move on to a 4-star book. And I feel like this is going to be a controversial 4-star because this actually has a really, really low Goodreads rating, a rating of 2.82 out of 2,889 ratings. And that is Everything the Darkness Eats by Eric LaRocca. I have read one book by Eric LaRocca, and that is Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, and loved that one. That one, I think I gave 4 or 5 stars to, one of the two. And this one for me was a 4-star too, but I totally get, the only thing I could think of as to why this is rated so low is because it is so graphic and so intense. This is extreme horror. I think actually he defines his genre as splatterpunk, which I don't know what the difference is, but it's very, very extreme. Look up trigger warnings if it matters to you, because lordy, like not just the typical stuff. This is very much queer horror. So it's a lot of stuff specific to that, but it also delves into God and our relationship with our creator and things of that. But for me, this is art. For me, the way Eric LaRocca writes, it feels like it's a reclaiming of something for himself. It feels like it's him dealing with his own trauma, and it feels like just very dark art, you know? But I totally get why this is not for everyone, and I'm not going to recommend this universally because it's a lot. It is a lot. We're following this guy. We're following 2 main point of views. One is Malik, and one is a man named Ghost. Ghost was my favorite. Immediately like fell for him and like wanted him to be okay. You know, I sympathized with him. He lost his wife recently, but he's thinking about maybe dating again at some point, but also he is very concerned because he likes men and women, that if he started dating a woman, they would be weird about the fact that he had dated or slept with men in the past and vice versa. So there's a lot of discussion here about queerness, a lot of isolation, a lot of self-hatred. The self-hatred is so thick. Anyway, Ghost, I think he has migraines or something. So he goes to the hospital to try to get some tests done, and you get his inside thoughts in his head, and you know that he feels like he doesn't matter. He feels like if he were to disappear, no one would notice. And he sees this little girl in the waiting room at the emergency room. There's something about her that makes him think that she feels the same way. Like if she disappeared, no one would care. And so he goes out of his way specifically to cheer her up, to make her feel special, to make her have a good day. And I'm just like, yes! Ghost is questioning everything about his faith, about his creator, about his existence. And so it turns out that he could just be the perfect person to help this man who is deep in the occult, and he's trying to, or so he claims to be trying to save God. It's getting weird. I know, it's getting weird. This book is really weird. It is really weird. You have to be able to suspend your disbelief. Meanwhile, on a seemingly separate note, sorry, I'm cracking my knuckles, there are elderly people going missing in this town, this small little town. And so Malik, who's the other perspective I told you about, is new to this town, and he is a police officer. He lives with his partner Brent. They are also uncomfortable in this small town, and he's kind of trying to investigate what's going on with these elderly people that have gone missing, and then their timelines converge. It's just really weird. It's really weird and out there, but something about it I connect with. Something about Eric LaRocca's writing I connect with. And I've read some reviews on this book that say, I'm a huge fan of Eric LaRocca, did not like this one. And having only 2 books that I've read of his, I don't feel that way. I feel like I got that same underlying trauma, but also exploration of grief, exploration of your own self. There's something in there that I just really connect with and appreciate. But honestly, content warnings for like the most graphic, terrible things you can imagine. I don't even want to say them on here, so look it up if you're at all concerned about that. And I liked this one. I liked it. It was hard to read. It was hard to get through, not gonna lie. But there's something so true in there that I can't deny, that I connect with on some kind of universal and visceral level. So there's that. Don't know if you're gonna want to read it or not, but that's what I think. Yeah, I am. I'm changing my ratings. My last 2 are both 4.5 star books. Okay, so I'm excited to tell you about those, but I just flipped them. One was a 4-star, and I think I liked it better than the other. So I think they're both gonna be 4.5 now. And both of these books I actually read for book clubs. The first one I'm gonna talk to you about is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll, and I read this for the book troop, which is Gabby's book club from Gabby Reads. We had a whole 5-show discussion on her channel about that as well, so I'll link that above and below if you're interested in checking that out. This one, it's very hard to describe. It's a fictionalized version or a fictionalized telling of Ted Bundy's crimes at the end of his killing sprees. We're following his victims, and specifically Pamela, who is the president of her sorority house at Florida State, which he invaded and killed 2 of them. You know what? Let's look this up right now, actually, because I still don't know how much of that's true. Okay, Chi Omega in Tallahassee around 3 a.m. January 15th, my birthday. But this was in 1978. That was freaky. And I was reading this around my birthday as well. Okay, so he did kill 2 women in that real life case and killed 2 women in the fictionalized version of the story as well. So Pamela's friend is one of the women. Obviously, these are all sorority sisters. They're all friends. But her best friend is one of the women who gets killed at Chi Omega. And then we're also following Ruth. Ruth is one of his victims, and we're following her 4 years prior to Pamela's timeline up until the moment of her death. And even after her death, we get her point of view, which is really interesting because we don't get that in real life. So that's one advantage to fictionalizing this. And then we're also following Martina, who is part of both storylines. So in my opinion, she's the main character of this because we see her throughout most of her life. We get her backstory and we get her growing from this and dealing with her grief and loss of Ruth because they were partners. I didn't want to read the description because it's so long, and here I've rambled even longer. This looks like it could sum it up. Bright Young Women is a story about 2 women from opposite sides of the country who become sisters in their fervent pursuit of the truth. It proposes a new narrative inspired by evidence that's been glossed over for decades in favor of the more sellable headlines. That the so-called brilliant and charismatic serial killer from Seattle was far more average than the countless books, movies, and primetime specials have led us to believe, and that it was the women whose lives he cut short who were the exceptional ones. And it does such a great job of proving that point. It does such a great job of making you think about how history has been passed down, whose stories were being told, and especially in this era of true crime obsession, of which I am a culprit. Like, I am obsessed with true crime as well. And that was my main draw to read this book, was that it was based on Ted Bundy. So there's this whole conversation in here about like what's ethical, what's not. It does have that kind of ethical gray area because this is a book that is so loud in its feminism that it is protesting the silencing of women's voices. But at the same time, Pamela, who one of our main characters is based off of, is still alive. And from what I understand, considering writing her own version of this story, of what happened to her, because it is her story. So at some point, are we being hypocrites if by releasing this story about women's voices who are being silenced, we are also silencing a woman's voice? Ethical conundrum. Gray area. I don't know. That is for you to decide on how you feel about that. For me, the story itself was perfect, and if it hadn't been for that little bit of doubt, discomfort that gave me, this probably would have been a 5-star book, because I fell in love with all of these characters. There were so many quotable moments. So much of this makes you feel strong as you're reading it. It makes you aware of the things that have changed since this time in America, at least, but it also makes you aware of the things that have not, the parallels that are still very much the same, about how feminism is not necessarily linear. It's not. But getting that hindsight for these characters as we follow, especially Pamela, to modern current day, where she's gone through a pandemic, she's processed all of this stuff, she's seen all of the docuseries, the documentaries, all of the things, giving that character the ability to stand back and say, hey, this is the cultural impact that my story has had. Again, realizing that this is a fictionalized character, not the real Pamela. But giving her that ability to do that is as a character, is very cool. It's very cool. So I really do hope that Pamela writes her own version of stories. I would love to read it. Pamela, if for some reason out in the world you find this video, or this video finds you, and you want to write that, I will absolutely love to review it if you want to send it to me. But yeah, otherwise, I think this is a really great book. And Pamela, if you are watching, please let me know whether you approve of Bright Young Women, because I need to know. I just have to know. I know that Jessica Knoll did a lot of research with one of the other victims in the sorority. So a lot of this is coming from true life facts, but I just don't know about Pamela's specific viewpoint. And since she is such a huge character in this, it's important. Also, Bright Young Women, the way where this title came from is really cool, because the judge who sentenced Ted Bundy gave him this whole speech, and they tell you about it in the book, and they give you a quote. But he does this whole speech about how, oh, you were such a bright young man, and you took the wrong path. You could have been so great, but you made these bad choices, and I'm sorry, partner, but now you gotta go to prison and get killed. The shocking part of that is that he wasn't thinking about the victims in that moment. He wasn't thinking about that. He called Ted Bundy a bright young man, when actually Ted Bundy was a joke. A joke. Was a full-on narcissist who thought he could get away with anything. But you know what? He's not that smart. He even represented himself in trial, which is, like, I don't know when that's ever worked for anyone. If you have examples, please send it to me. I'd love to know. So yeah, calling this Bright Young Women is a reference to that quote, saying, no, we're not going to talk about this bright young man. We're going to talk about these bright young women who really were doing amazing things and whose lives were cut short. And we're going to talk about all of the effects of that through history in the last 50 years. It was just really good. It was great. Again, if you want to get into more detail and more nuance, check out Gabby's live show from the book troupe. She, myself, and Jordan from Sorry Book Solid were all in there discussing this book, and we all had January birthdays, and we did a little, you know, had a little drink and just had fun. So if you're interested, check that out. Moving on to my final book, and this is the one that I was just edged out, Bright Young Women. I don't know, they're so different. They're so different. Anyway, it's Monstrilio. It's my book club's book pick for the month of January. As of right now, the live show is in a couple of days. So when I put this up, it'll probably be available by then, so I'll link it above and below as well. And I'm gonna discuss that with my friend Courtney and Jess. I'll link their stuff down below as well if you wanna check them out. Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. So good. I'm so glad I picked this for the book club because there's so much to talk about and I cannot wait to discuss this. I initially was going to give this a 4-star rating because it was a little slow to get into for me. But the way this story ends with the last part 4 and the perspective of Monstrilio, or M as he later becomes known, chilled me to the bone. Like, it did so much. It did so many things. Again, this is queer horror, casually queer, as we will discuss later. And as Kayla says, from Books and Lala, or more specifically, the Literally Dead Book Club, in her live discussion of the same book. She called it casually queer, and I thought that was so perfect. Like, the phrasing is so perfect because it is. This is a literary horror debut as well. I just watched an interview with him, or Q&A with the author, and I love it even more now. I think that's actually probably what pushed this over the edge for me, was watching that and getting to know the author a little bit, because I think he's so adorable. I love him so much. He is almost like a little Monstrilio. Like, he's just this small little man, and he's so quirky and thoughtful and creative, and I love him. Hopefully he doesn't eat people though. Anyway, what's this book about? We're following 4 characters in 4 parts of this. It's interestingly structured because we get each character, one in part 1, one in part 2, one in part 3, one in part 4, and then we never hear from that character's point of view again. Obviously, they're all still in the story, but we never get that same point of view twice. It's like a case study. Like, we're never going to hear from that person again. It's just a really unique way to structure a book. And he said he didn't set out to do that, but that was just the way it came out of him. This woman, Margot, and her husband, Joseph. They live in Mexico City with their son, Santiago. Santiago was born with only one underdeveloped lung, and that lung, they didn't think he was going to make it very long after his birth at all. Somehow he grows to be 11 years old before he finally passes away due to this lung issue. So Magos decides that she's going to cut open her dead child's body and save a piece of his lung. She puts it in a jar, and at some point this lung, she starts feeding it and it gains sentience, and it starts to grow into this little Monstrilio. But Monstrilio has an appetite for humans. Monstrilio is other. He's like anything other, anyone who feels other. And this could be in relation to queerness, it could be in relation to ability, neurodiversity, whatever. Anybody that feels othered is Monstrilio, although Monstrilio has an interesting nature, like I said, which is to eat humans. And so we're really exploring, first of all, this family, which everyone in each of the POVs is in this family. We're also exploring love, hunger, the fear of not being loved because of who you are, because of something that's innate about you, the fear of not being all of one thing but not another thing, not feeling like you fit in. And the way this is written, it's a little bit slower, was a little bit slower for me at the beginning, because we start with Magos' perspective, which I really liked. Then we follow Lena. Lena is a family friend who is actually in love with Magos, and like her entire life she's been in love with Magos. Lena's also a surgeon, so she's quite impressive. And then we get the perspective of Joseph, Magos' husband. Then lastly, we get the perspective of Monstrilio. When we got the perspective of Monstrilio, like a knife in the heart, like so raw, so unafraid, to just go there and explore not only Monstrilio's hunger and urge to eat living things, but also different kinds of hunger, like sexual hunger or abuse situations. It's interweaving all of these things. It's so intense. It's really intense. The books that this reminded me of specifically was one, Night Bitch, and that is in reference to Magos's point of view as the mother. She kind of falls into this career as a performance artist, and she uses that to deal with her grief. And Night Bitch has the same kind of thing. It's dealing with grief through art in both stories, but in Monstrilio, the grief is for the loss of her child, and in Night Bitch, the grief is for the loss of herself as she became a mother and lost part of herself. So, and they're both really weird and out there and very specifically just odd in this like almost literary horror subgenre. Not almost, the literary horror subgenre, both of them. This also reminds me of Saving Noah. And that's the point when we got to Monstrilio's point of view that reminded me of Saving Noah, because we are getting the perspective of Monstrilio. And it's this very fine line because he's doing these terrible things. He knows they're wrong. And he's trying to escape his own nature. It's impossible. In that same way that Noah from Saving Noah has this hunger or this urge. I don't want to be too explicit about that, but if you're interested, it's by Lucinda Berry, and it's a really, really, really hard read, but nuanced read. And it's about his attraction to young kids. I'll just say that. Ooh, I don't even like saying it. But in the same way that with Noah, he knows what he wants is wrong and he's trying to fight that nature. So that's kind of why it reminded me of Monstrilio, because Monstrilio just wants to kill people and eat people. Specifically, first of all, people. It's not the same to get like a dog or a cow even. He gets off, or it tastes better when it's something that can dream. It's dark. It's dark. It's the point that I'm trying to get across. It's dark. I don't want to get too deep into it because I do want you to go watch that live discussion, which I have not yet had at this moment, but which I'm sure is going to be amazing. I can't wait because both of these ladies are like, we're on the same vibe level. All of us. We're on the same vibe level. So I know it's gonna be good. There is a little bit of gore in here as well. Ooh, that's to be expected. This is still horror. But yeah, I love everything that this book is exploring. And the only reason I'm giving it not 5 stars, I have to do not 5 stars because I wasn't there until the end. I wasn't captivated until that last part. I mean, I was captivated, but I was not like 5-star feeling. You know, I went through it in the first 3 parts and I was like, I like it, it's good, but it's not giving me that like 5-star zhuzh. You know what I'm saying? And so that last one, I finally got there though in part 4. Those are the 6 books that I read in the month of January. Honestly, that's lower than I typically read. I typically like to read at least 8, if not more, but my average has been about 8 a month, so this is below average for me. There was a lot going on in January though. If you watched this video to the end, give me a monster emoji of some kind down in the comments. And if you are still here, thank you so much. I appreciate you for watching all of this. I know I've just, like I said, I've been babbling. I knew I was gonna do it. I knew it was happening and it happened. So, you know, whatever. This is me. This is how it goes. Thank you though. I appreciate all of you so much. Honestly, I really, really do. And I love having a community that I could talk about these books with. Like, how cool is that? How cool is that? Each and every one of you, if you're new, I would say this does represent my reading this month. Mostly thriller and horror. Feminist stuff, I'm down. That's generally my taste. So yeah, y'all, I'm gonna let you go. Don't forget that life is short, so read Wryly. Cheers and goodbye.